Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Ramon. I'm a symphonic and progressive rock musician who arrived 40 years too late, and above all, a great admirer and student of the music from this extraordinary era. This is a place where we talk about some of the most important songs and bands from the golden age of modern music. The 1960, the 1970, and the 1980. If you're new here, please subscribe. It's free and leave a like if you enjoy this reaction. Please forgive me, but I've grown tired of having someone in virtually every video making comments about AI and of having to explain the same thing over and over again. So I've decided to address it here once and for all and put the matter to rest. Today is a very special day for me because we're beginning the journey into my favorite movement in music, symphonic and progressive rock. This branch of rock music emerged in the 1970s and became the most popular style of that decade. Almost every major band experimented with either symphonic or progressive rock at some point. Before we continue, I'd like to explain why this style is known by those names. In the case of symphonic rock, the music borrows heavily from classical symphonic music. For example, the songs are much longer than what had been common until then, often lasting 10 or even 20 minutes, and in some cases an entire album consists of a single continuous composition. Very often these albums are what we call concept albums, meaning that the whole record revolves around a single theme, even though the individual sections or songs may be quite different from one another. The music also incorporates many arrangements, orchestral ideas, and compositional techniques drawn from classical music. In my opinion, the bands within this movement feature some of the finest musicians in rock history. Many of them had a classical musical education, and that can clearly be heard in the sophistication of their compositions. Progressive rock shares the same foundations as symphonic rock but is generally more experimental and less structured. While symphonic rock may have highly complex arrangements, everything ultimately serves a coherent musical purpose. Progressive rock, on the other hand, follows no fixed rules at all. Songs can change direction completely, introduce unexpected ideas, and end somewhere entirely different from where they began. It's worth saying that these two styles complement one another, and many bands combine both approaches so naturally that it's impossible to place them exclusively into one category. For that reason, they are often described as symphonic progressive rock. There were even several different schools within the movement. One of the best known was the Canterbury scene, which produced some magnificent bands, while the Italian progressive rock movement gave us groups that, in my opinion, stood shoulder to shoulder with the very best British and American bands. This movement became so influential that even bands which didn't belong to it made occasional forays into progressive or symphonic rock, no doubt encouraged by their record companies. These artists not only sold millions of records and filled stadiums, but I genuinely believe this movement produced some of the greatest bands in the history of music, second only, of course, to the Beatles, who, in my opinion, exist in a galaxy entirely of their own. Today we're going to explore one of those legendary bands, Genesis. They were one of the greatest groups ever to emerge from this movement, producing complete albums that are true works of art, performed by musicians of extraordinary talent and creativity. Although Genesis certainly incorporated many symphonic elements, I think it's most accurate to describe them primarily as a progressive rock band. Of course, we're talking about their early years with Peter Gabriel, and perhaps a little beyond that period. Later, they moved towards a more conventional rock and pop sound, although it's only fair to say that after Gabriel's departure, they continued to produce outstanding progressive music for several years under the leadership of Phil Collins. Today's performance comes from the Peter Gabriel era and, as always, it's a live recording. You already know that when I introduce a band to the channel, I like to begin with a concert performance whenever possible, especially from their early years, so that you can recognize the band members and also witness how they evolved over time. The song we're about to watch is Watcher of the Skies, and I'm convinced it's going to blow your mind not only because of its astonishing musical quality, but also because of the band's extraordinary stage performance. As always, I encourage you to listen very carefully because artists from this era often reveal new details with every listen, and sometimes it's the simplest musical ideas that move us most deeply. So, fasten your seatbelts. Here we go. You'll see, the stage presentation is incredible, especially when you consider the limited and rather primitive technology available at the time. The musicians of those decades weren't just musicians, they were artists. And not only on stage, their music was their way of life. And the character they created often became even more important than the person behind it. Nor was it just the bands themselves. Millions of fans identified completely with their favorite groups. They dressed like them, thought like them, and in many cases, even lived like them. Just look at the hippie movement, which inspired young people across half the world to leave home and embrace that lifestyle. Apart from the sheer musical brilliance, You'll also notice the remarkable number of technical innovations and creative ideas they introduced. For example, Phil Collins develops a series of rhythmic patterns and drum breaks that had simply never been heard before. Another fascinating innovation is that it's not just the bass following the drummer. Every instrument is locked together with absolute precision. Bear in mind that these are long, highly complex compositions filled with changes, arrangements, and transitions, all of which the musicians had to keep in their heads without relying on sheet music, since most of them couldn't even read it. Just imagine the amount of information they had to memorize for a concert lasting 1 or even 2 hours, and the countless hours of rehearsal required to make everything work with such perfection. One of the things that made me fall in love with this style of music is that these are beautifully crafted and meticulously finished works created with extraordinary intelligence, leaving little or no room for improvisation. Take a guitar solo, for example. It isn't simply a sequence of scales and phrases improvised on the spot, as you might find in jazz. Here, every single note has been deliberately composed and carefully developed to serve the story the music is telling. That's why those guitar solos are always played exactly the same way. Among other reasons, it's because most fans know them by heart, and they simply wouldn't accept them being changed from one performance to another, as doing so would take away much of what makes them so special. Well, we've reached the end of another chapter in this musical series. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm sure you've never seen anything quite like this before. And I'm not just referring to Peter Gabriel's genius, but also to the band's incredible sound, their precision, and their remarkable synchronization. And remember, this is just a glimpse. Now imagine what an entire concert was like. And, as always, my dear friends, it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you once again. Please leave your comments, thoughts, and suggestions below, as I always enjoy reading them. Until next week, when we'll meet again in those wonderful years,